We're in session. The jurors are in the jury room, and defendant and counsel are present. It's a little warm in here, so I understand that the General Services is aware of that. And is it just this room, or is it the other courtroom still there?
I don't know. No, because I was in 701.
She just asked.
He just asked because the temperature went down so much and stuff.
Okay, thank you. Well, apparently somebody's aware of it and dealing with it, I suppose. All right. Who's your next witness?
Dr. Ginger Calloway.
Okay. Ask the jury to come in, please. Okay. All right, we're in session. Good afternoon, folks. It's kind of warm in here, as you can tell, and that's not true in the other courtrooms. General Services has been made aware of it, and I wrote down, quote, they are working on it. Okay? I don't know if that's the good news or the bad news. It's just they are working on it. But I can tell you that had you been here 2 months ago, I would have announced to you that the state-of-the-art plumbing decided to stop working. And it stopped for about 2 days. So it was a real challenge for us dealing with that. So we're still working the bugs out of this new place. So anyway, if it gets really uncomfortable, we'll just have to stop. But I think we'll, if we stop this afternoon, then we got another half day to go next week. I'm trying to keep this on schedule and ahead of schedule. I think we're doing really well so far, so bear with us. Further evidence on behalf of the state?
Yes, Your Honor. The state calls Dr. Ginger Calloway.
Okay, doctor. There's a Bible there. If you'd take your oath, please, doctor.
I do.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Calloway, could you state your name for the jury?
Yes, my name is Ginger Calloway.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a psychologist.
And what is a psychologist?
Clinical psychologists work with people in treatment modalities to help alleviate their suffering. Forensic psychologists work with people who are involved with the law for one reason or another to provide evaluations and opinion to the trier of fact.
And do you specialize in that area of forensic psychology?
I do.
And to be a psychologist, what kind of schooling or training are required?
I have a PhD in psychology.
And after you acquired your PhD, do you also do further internships, further experience before your license as a psychologist?
Well, I did a predoctoral internship in clinical psychology. I was already licensed at the master's level. After obtaining a PhD, in our state, we're required to have 2 years of postdoctoral training.
Where do you practice as a psychologist?
Here in Raleigh.
And at some point back in 2010, were you involved in a child custody evaluation between Laura Ackerson and Grant Hayes?
I was.
And could you tell the jury how it was that you came to be involved in that?
Yes. The attorneys and their clients agreed to select me as the custody evaluator, and they signed a consent order which appointed me as the court's sole expert in conducting that evaluation.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Dr. Calloway, I hand you has been marked and entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 406. Is this a copy of your child custody evaluation in that case between Laura Ackerson and Grant Hayes?
Yes, it is.
And is that, I guess, when did you finish that evaluation?
I completed it, I believe, May 16th, May 16th, 2011.
And did you provide that to attorneys for both Laura Ackerson and Grant Hayes?
I did.
Okay. And does that appear to be a copy of your report?
Yes.
And does it also appear to have some sort of coffee stain on the outside?
Yes.
And were you made aware that this report was found in this defendant Amanda Hayes and Grant Hayes' vehicle?
Yes,
Okay. Do you also have a copy in front of you that isn't coffee stained?
I do.
And State's Exhibit 406, are there writings in the margins and parts of this exhibit that are circled?
Yes.
And those handwritten parts, is that something that you did?
No.
Okay. Now, looking at the front of your evaluation, did you record the participants in this evaluation?
I do.
And one of those was Grant Hayes.
Correct.
And did you acquire or determine how old Grant Hayes was?
Yes.
And how old was he at the time of this evaluation in 2011?
32.
And did you learn how old Laura Ackerson was at the time of this evaluation?
Yes.
How old was she?
27.
And then the children that were the subject of this evaluation, could you tell the jury their names and how old they were at the time of this evaluation?
The oldest child was Grant Ruffin Hayes IV, and he was 3 years old at the time that this report was turned in. The younger child was Gentle Rain Hayes, and he was 21 months at the time of the report was completed.
In State's Exhibit 406 that's before you, additionally attached to that report, is there also an envelope?
Yes, there is.
And when you finished this evaluation, you mentioned that you sent it to attorneys for both parties.
That's correct.
What does that envelope read?
It reads, Mr. Grant Hayes, personal and confidential, 4021 Bella Park Trail, number 322, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27613.
And does it appear to come from a law firm?
Yes, Wooten and Coley.
And did you learn that Ford Coley, I guess when this child evaluation was done, was that Grant Hayes' attorney?
That's correct.
Additionally, as part of this child custody evaluation, did you talk to, besides the party, other collateral sources?
I did.
And was one of those collateral sources this defendant, Amanda Hayes?
Yes, she was.
And did you learn how old she was?
I did. I believe she was 39 at the time.
In drawing your attention to, I guess, the second page of your child custody evaluation, initially did you list how the case came to be referred to in the background of the case?
I did.
And you were appointed by the Lenore County District Court?
That's correct.
And does that mean that you were the expert for Grant Hayes or Laura Ackerson?
I was the court's expert, so I was not, although I was paid by the litigants, I was appointed as the court's expert.
So as part of your responsibilities in making this evaluation, were you to be impartial and not lean towards one party or the other party?
That's correct.
And when was that appointment made to you?
I believe the judge signed the order on June the 29th of 2010.
At that point, did you, as you first start to do this custody evaluation, could you explain to the jury what's the first thing that you do in starting this?
Well, the first thing is to obtain the order, because the order states then that I have been appointed, so that's the first step. After that, then I have a three-way conversation with the two attorneys.
That's a conference call, or you sit down with the attorneys from both sides?
Correct.
And what's the point of doing that?
Because the attorneys have a certain information, and they also have what we call referral questions. These are the questions that they, which they've obtained from their clients, want to have answered as a part of the evaluation.
And what were the referral questions in this case?
Well, those are on page 3. One was that Grant Hayes was concerned about Laura Ackerson's mental stability, and he believed her to be mentally unstable. Laura questioned Grant's credibility and believed him to be manipulative, and remarked that he had made numerous threats to her, so she wanted his credibility evaluated. Let's see, there was some confusion about the issue of surgery for the younger child, so that was one of the questions that was asked of me. How did these misunderstandings or differences in perception come about? Mr. Hayes raised the issue that he believed that Ms. Ackerson was trying to influence the children against him, what used to be called parental alienation syndrome, but he thought that she was alienating the children. Then the other things that Mr. Hayes was concerned about, Laura Atkinson's effect on the children, that she was causing them to be more immature and less social. That's on.
And I guess as part of this evaluation, what's the end goal as you start this evaluation? Is it to find where the best place is for the children?
That would be the placement issue, yes, is one of the issues, yes. It's not the only one, however.
And what are other issues that you look at as part of the evaluation that you make?
Well, that would be these referral questions. So was Laura Ackerson, for example, mentally unstable? Okay, was Mr. Hayes not credible?
Okay. And as you answer those questions, does that help give you guidance on what you would recommend to the court in terms of where the children should be and who should share their custody?
And also, the key issue, of course, in a child custody evaluation is the parenting. So if there are problems with the parenting, which Mr. Hayes brought up about Laura Ackerson, there would be interventions that would be recommended to address those parenting needs.
And turning your attention to page 5, did you also have a referral question that Mr. Sargent, who is Laura's attorney, and Laura had concerns about Amanda Hayes? I'm looking at the second to last paragraph on page 5.
Yes.
Okay. And part of your further concerns were that Grant frequently moved with Amanda Hayes?
I don't know about with Amanda Hayes, but his frequent moves, yes.
Okay. And then after you, I guess, get these referral questions, do you then attempt to put together a history of the family situation?
Yes, that's what I do.
Okay. And that's section 4 of your report, is that correct?
That's correct.
And this lists out dates throughout Grant and Laura's relationship, and Grant's take on those dates and Laura's takes on those dates?
Yes. What I do is put the date and then the event that someone's reporting to me and what the mother says about it and what the dad says about it.
For instance, on January 10th, you noted that Amanda moves to New York to be with her daughter, and Grant reports he moved to New York City to be with Amanda and her 20-year-old daughter, Shay. And then if Laura had input on that issue, that's where that would go as well.
That's correct.
And by doing this, what do you accomplish in seeing each party's view on certain dates throughout the relationship?
Well, that would help the reader of this document to know whether there were differences in perception, for one thing, and what it is that each party was saying about that particular event.
And as part of this parental history, did you learn that Grant Hayes and Laura Ackerson had 2 children together?
Yes.
And were you here for Mr. Sargent's testimony earlier?
I was.
Okay. You found out that background about how Grant Hayes had taken little Grant to New York and hadn't returned him to Laura after 2 weeks?
Correct.
And that instigated part of this custody battle?
Yes.
After you get this family history from both sides, do you then begin to evaluate the case that you have before you?
Well, I actually start evaluating before I did. This timeline comes at the end of the evaluation because it's gathered as I go through the process of getting information from collateral sources, from the parents, and obviously from the attorneys in the very beginning, but also documents that I review as well.
And those documents, where do you get those documents from?
The attorneys send me some, and then other places I get release of information from forms from the parents, and the parents consent to me being in touch, for example, with doctors, or if in the case of child care, with child care workers, anyone who might have contact with the children that could, who could provide information about the children.
Do you ask the parents to provide anything on their own besides just information? What do they put together for you?
There's something I give the parents called a parenting history survey, and it is a very detailed sort of information tool that allows them to organize all the information that they have about themselves and their children and their involvement with the legal system and what they want for custody, what they want as an outcome of the evaluation, those kind of questions.
And how many questions are on that family parenting survey?
I don't remember it's long.
It's a long survey.
Yes.
I think the jury's heard some of that through Heidi Shoemaker. But as part of those allegations that come from that parenting history survey, do you compare them? How do you vet the accuracy of information in those parenting history surveys?
Well, I would take the information that comes from the parenting history survey and look into, well, I would ask both parents about their take on the allegation, and then I would attempt to get records to corroborate or to disconfirm that these events did in fact take place the way the parents are saying they did.
And as part of this case, you learned that Grant and Amanda Hayes were married in April of 2010?
Correct.
Okay. And then in 2011, early in the year, around Valentine's Day, that's when Grant, the fourth, little Grant, went to New York City with Grant Hayes, and Laura was left with Gentle.
That was in 2010.
I'm sorry, in 2010. And after that happened, were you aware that?
Yes, that was, wait a minute, was that?
If I could direct your attention
Yeah,
to the
let's
timeline.
look at the date. I'm not sure about that. I said that and I don't know.
And if you look at, I guess, page 7, does that reflect that those events happened on Valentine's Day of 2010?
Yes,
Okay. And that's what initiated the custody.
that's right. You're right.
Grant and Amanda are married in April of 2010. You learned that information?
Yes.
Okay. And the parents are having many disagreements, and the ex parte motion is in June of 2010?
Yes.
And the consent order appointing you is in June 29th of 2010?
Correct.
And then at some point in July, were you contacted or did you become aware of a Dr. Wins?
It was not until I met with Grant and Laura. After I get the order of appointment and I've talked to the attorneys and then I obtain the money for the funds to initially begin, then I have a joint meeting with the two parents, and that's when I learned about Dr. Wins.
And who is Dr. Wins?
She's a child psychologist in Raleigh.
And what role did she have in your child custody evaluation in this case?
Well, she didn't. She was contacted by Mr. Hayes, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, Amanda and Grant Hayes, and she was contacted after the order of appointment appointing me as a custody evaluator was signed. So I reviewed her notes, and she was not clear exactly what she was doing, but it sounded like she was providing some sort of a custody consultation.
And so your role is an expert for the court, is that accurate?
That's correct.
And so in cases where you're appointed by the court, each party doesn't get their own expert.
That's correct.
Okay. And were you surprised that Dr. Wins had been contacted and brought onto this by Grant and Amanda Hayes?
Yes, I was.
At some point in 2010, did you become aware that Amanda Hayes was pregnant?
I did. Mm-hmm.
And did you learn that the baby was due in June of 2011?
Yes.
And at this point in your custody evaluation, as these months go by, how is the payment planned out for both parties?
Well, initially, Mr. Hayes was supposed to pay for the evaluation. And typically, I tell the parents in the first joint appointment that I have with them sort of what the expectation is for how much the evaluation is likely to cost and how it is that I would expect them to pay. So that was explained in the first appointment.
And so you sit down with the parents?
Yes,
Okay. And did you do that in this matter?
I did.
So you sat in a room with Grant and Laura Ackerson?
I did.
And at that point, do you talk over the allegations that each party has, or do you sort of break down how the custody evaluation is going to work?
It's a little bit of both. I start with explaining to them how the evaluation is going to take place and what I'm going to be doing with their children, because people are interested in what you're going to be doing with their children, and just answer any questions that they might have about the procedures and what they can expect and what their anticipations, expectations are about the whole evaluation process. And so I start from beginning to end and explain the whole thing to them. And then after that, I start to ask them some questions about themselves and how they got together. And many people disagree in that first session about all kinds of things.
Over the course of this custody evaluation, how much time did you spend with Laura Ackerson?
Probably I think I spent between 20 and 25 hours. Mm-hmm.
And how long did you spend with Grant Hayes?
The same, roughly the same.
And as part of those 20 to 25 hours, did you also have occasion to go to Grant and Amanda Hayes' home and inspect it and walk around and talk with them?
I did.
Okay. Did you also interview Amanda Hayes?
I did.
And did you talk to Amanda Hayes for 2 hours?
I did.
Okay. Now, at some point, strike that. When you first sat down with Grant Hayes and Laura Ackerson, what was the cost that was to be taken on by Grant Hayes?
At that point, it was $5,000.
And was there a payment schedule for Grant Hayes and Laura Ackerson as this evaluation went on?
Yes.
And could you explain that to the jury?
Well, I believe it was the second time that I asked Mr. Hayes to come, to make another deposit. He did not make that deposit. So my policy and my procedure in my office is and in forensic psychology, when you're supposed to work off of money that's like a retainer when you're working with private people. So I asked for that additional retainer, if you will, and it wasn't forthcoming. So then my next step, after giving several opportunities for the retainer to be paid, is to then write to the attorneys and tell them that the evaluation is suspended until the fees are paid.
And that happened in November of 2010?
It did.
In February of 2011, did that situation change where the evaluation was suspended?
Yes, the attorneys and the judge met, is my understanding.
And did Judge Heath from Lenore County District Court sign an order directing you to start the evaluation again?
Yes, and for each parent then to pay half the fees.
Okay. And so at that point, how much money was paid by each parent?
$2,500.
So at that point, I guess Grant and Amanda, were they responsible for $7,500 and Laura was just responsible for $2,500?
I think that's right. I'd have to go back and look at the actual amounts.
What's the total amount for the evaluation?
I think it ended up, I can't remember if it was 10,000 or 15. I don't remember.
Now, after that order by Judge Heath to start the evaluation again, at some point later in that February, did you become aware of some sort of allegation of child abuse?
Yes.
And was that Grant Hayes who initiated, or Grant or Amanda Hayes who initiated that report of child abuse?
Yes.
Okay. And ultimately, was that substantiated by Lenore County Child Protective Services?
No.
And again, were you surprised that you weren't contacted as part of that?
Yes, I was, because in my report I explained, I can't remember what page it's on, but I explained that in that first appointment that I have with the parents, which is a joint appointment, I always tell parents I'm obligated to report any kind of child abuse that I'm aware of, and so I was surprised when the report came in the midst of the custody evaluation.
And that report of that allegation of child abuse, that was on February 25th of 2011?
I think so. Let me look.
I direct your attention to page 10 of your report.
Okay. Yes.
And ultimately, in April, Child Protective Services didn't substantiate that allegation.
That's correct.
And was the allegation, if you could explain to the jury what the allegation was of child abuse?
And it was to Wake County CPS, not Lenore County.
I apologize.
That's all right. I just noticed it myself.
And the allegation was it some bruises on the kids' legs?
Yes, bruises on the children's knees.
And did you watch the kids play together?
I did.
And what, with respect to their knees or legs, did you see happening?
Well, these are little kids, so their impulse control is not what it would be if they were older. So they were boys, and they banged their little cars up against each other's knees quite frequently in the home visit that I made to Grant and Amanda's house.
So ultimately, was there any allegation of Laura abusing these boys that was substantiated by anyone?
No.
And if there was some thought that one of the children were being abused as part of your evaluation, you directed the parties to contact you?
Yes.
During this evaluation period, did you conduct some testing with those little boys and with Grant, Amanda, and Laura?
Yes.
And could you tell the jury a little bit about what sort of testing you would do with respect to the little boys specifically?
Well, with respect to them, they wouldn't have the same kind of psychological measures that their parents would have had. But there was a behavioral observation which was structured in a particular way, and I would consider that a psychological procedure, not a test per se. And that was part of what I looked at with the two children. I also did home visits, and that was another opportunity for behavioral observations to take place by doing home visits. And last, I saw them in my office individually to interact with me and to talk with me in whatever way they could, which was limited for the little one, of course, but less so for the older one.
And did that happen when you talk to the children and evaluate the children? Do you also, you mentioned you go to the homes of each parent?
I do.
And ultimately, directing your attention to page 18 of your report, did you conduct a home evaluation with Grant, Amanda, in May of 2010?
Yes, it was May, wasn't it 2011? Because 2010 is when the evaluation started.
Okay.
2010, I would have had the home visit. 2011, the evaluation restarted, and so it would have been after that.
Okay. And on page 18, in the second sentence of the second paragraph, it says May of 2010, but you believe that to be 2011?
I think you're right. It does say May 2010, and I think that's not correct.
Okay. And in May of 2011, did you go to Amanda, Grant, and Shay's house or apartment?
No, you know what? Let's look at this again. This is saying what you're pointing me to on page 18 is that May of 2010 is when Grant, Amanda, and Shay moved from New York City to an apartment.
You're correct. I apologize.
Yeah.
In March of 2011, did you do the home visit?
Yes.
And that was, were you held off by performing that home visit because of this allegation of child abuse?
Yes.
And so
That and the non-payment of fees.
So after the fees are paid, Child Protective Services looks into what happened. It's not substantiated, or it's unsubstantiated. At that point, do you go and perform this home visit?
I did in their case because I hadn't done it back in the fall of 2010.
And with Laura, did you do that earlier in the evaluation?
Correct.
And when you went to visit Amanda and Grant's apartment, did you find that to be a 3-bedroom apartment in northern Raleigh?
Yes.
And you mentioned in your report that it's on the 3rd floor of the complex.
Yes.
And you noted that entry to that apartment occurs by interior hallways.
Yes.
And in fact, when you showed up there, you went up to the apartment with Grant, who's bringing groceries, and the little boys.
Yes.
And they took an elevator up to the apartment.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you did that home visit, Grant and Amanda were there, and you noted things about the apartment and if there were any danger posed to the children.
Right.
Okay. And did you find any dangers posed to the children in that apartment?
Well, one thing I noted here that concerned me was that there was a screen that was out in the children's bedroom and the window was open, and that was concerning, but also made note of the fact that CPS didn't seem to consider it an issue.
So the screen, a minor thing maybe that you told them to work on, but otherwise the home was
Yes.
appeared to be fine.
It appeared to be fine.
Okay. When you were there, did you notice any, we'll strike that. When you went to Laura's apartment, did you note if it was a safe place for the children?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And did you find it to be so?
Yes.
And after you did the home visits, at some point, did you do a video evaluation of the children with their parents?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the purpose of doing that?
It is to look at the kind of attachment relationship that the child and the parent have. So there's a videotaped observation of each parent with each child, and the procedure is the same each time, so that then you can see how the child and the parent interact, what they do on separation, which for little kids is stressful. So there's a little bit of intended stress to see what happens when you stress the child. You don't want to stress the child needlessly or for too long, but you want to see how they react when their parent leaves the room. So that's what the purpose of that videotaping is to get a sense of how the kiddo reacts to the parent when the parent comes back and when they leave.
And did you perform that with those 2 little boys, and Laura Ackerson and Grant Hayes?
I did.
And was that factored into making your evaluation of where would be the best place for these children and what the custody arrangement would be for these children?
Yes.
Additionally, this family history, is that important to you in determining sort of how the children developed?
Yes.
And specifically with Gentle, Laura was with Gentle for some 10 months, is that correct?
Correct.
While Grant and Amanda were in New York with Little Grant?
Yes.
Okay. Were you concerned about that effect on both Gentle and Little Grant?
Yes, I discussed that in the report.
And can you address that and what concerns it caused for you?
Well, I think where I talked about it is, I know I talked about it in the analysis section, which is at the end.
Okay.
And I discussed it with regard to the transition when Gentle was transitioned from his mother's care, with whom he had been for the 10 months, and then the transition occurred in June of 2010 to where he was spending the majority of his time with his father and his stepmother.
Is it for these children at this young age, I guess they were 3 and 21 months old, being with solely one parent, what kind of issues does that present for a child as they develop?
Well, little children don't have the same ability to think or talk about matters, or to have to understand their emotions about matters in the way that older children do. So it's difficult for children when they've been with one person then to make a transition to someone else.
And at this point, you're aware of the temporary custody situation where both boys were to be with Grant and Amanda during the week, and then Laura was to have the boys for the 2 days on the weekend.
Correct.
Ultimately, did you recommend something different than that?
I did.
And was part of that because the children needed to have both parents in their lives.
Yes.
Turning your attention to page 36, did you also do a social history and background of these families, and including this defendant, Amanda Hayes?
Yes.
And Amanda Hayes was a factor in your custody evaluation, wasn't she?
Yes.
And could you explain why?
Because she was the stepmother and she was another caregiver.
Okay. And is it important for you to know what kind of parents are going to be around the children when they're at the home of the biological father?
Yes,
Okay. And you mentioned that you interviewed Amanda.
I did.
Okay. And looking at the top of page 36, did you ask Amanda how the family makes money?
Yes.
And what did she tell you?
Well, what I say here on page 36, when Amanda was asked how the family makes money, she reported that, quote, Grant has a little money here and there. I've sold some things, and we've spent our savings on the custody situation.
And were you made aware of the financial situation of that family while they were going through this custody evaluation?
Well, not in detail, but certainly in a general way.
Okay. Turning your attention to page 37, you received some history from Grant and Amanda Hayes about their relationship. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And Amanda, you learned that Amanda was an actress.
Yes.
Okay. And that she was pregnant and expecting the little girl in June.
Yes.
And you learned that she wasn't working outside of the home and she had no plans to work outside the home.
Correct.
And I guess the rest of that paragraph on page 37, could you tell the jury what you learned about how Amanda anticipated her life after the baby came?
Amanda says about working after the baby comes, quote, no, I'm also an artist. I see myself with 3 little kids doing art at their little table, end of quotes.
And so Amanda told you that she saw her life with 3 children in her household.
Yes, that's correct.
And of course, Amanda and Grant, as you're doing this evaluation, are going to be sharing custody. Laura and Grant and Amanda are going to be sharing custody of these 2 children, Gentle and Little Grant.
Well, I'm not sure how to answer that. I'm not quite.
At that point, Little Grant and Gentle were going between both households.
I see. Yes. Yes.
And that statement by Amanda, you took that to mean when her daughter was born, she would also be in the home with those 2 little boys and her daughter.
Yes.
Did you additionally do some behavioral observations of the parties in this case as you interviewed them?
Yes, that's ongoing.
And did you find was Laura a very aggressive person?
No.
Okay. How would you describe Laura?
Well, let me find where that is.
If I turn
Okay.
you to page 42.
Okay.
And specifically the 3rd paragraph, do you talk about how Laura was tense and stiff?
Yes.
And could you read, I guess, from where you wrote that she is defensive and comes across as tense and stiff during interviews? Could you read the rest of that paragraph?
She is defensive and comes across as tense and stiff during interviews. She has not learned how, and this isn't just behavioral observations, by the way. This at the top it says test results, impressions, and conclusions. So that's what I'm reading.
I apologize. I didn't mean to lead you that way. So you look at everything in coming to these impressions of the parents.
Yes.
And could you continue with your impressions of Laura?
She has not learned how to successfully balance appropriate self-disclosure and a need to be private or limited in her report of matters. Her tenseness, reserve, and careful manner could lead others to mistrust her and to question the accuracy of her reports. Her uncertainty and lack of self-assurance cause her to appear vacillating or, quote, flip-flop, as Grant describes her. This is an accurate and perceptive comment about her. This vacillation and uncertainty will make others wary of her at times, and she will confuse other people. She is less mature than other adults and is easily overwhelmed relative to other adults. She is chronically vulnerable, a chronically vulnerable or fragile person with a poorly developed sense of self that she defends in impulsive emotional ways at times. During the initial appointment with her and Grant, for example, she was quick to criticize him with barbed or, quote, sharp comments.
As the course of this evaluation went on, did you see Laura grow and mature as a person?
I don't think that's the way I described her in here.
Well, and when you first met Laura, this custody evaluation had just been undertaken, correct?
Right. Most of my interactions with Laura occurred in the fall of 2010.
Okay. So you didn't keep track of how her job had progressed or how her life was progressing moving on before May of 2011 when you made this?
Well, she continued to submit materials to me, and she continued to keep me informed. But I think the bulk of my interviews and testing with her were done in the fall of 2010.
And in fact, she provided you with a notebook of detailed information about her interactions with Amanda and Grant Hayes.
Yes, she did.
And additionally, she provided you with a tremendous amount of recordings of her interactions with Grant and Amanda Hayes.
Yes, she did.
You mentioned that you also spoke with some collateral sources in this case, this custody evaluation, I should say. And those include Grant's parents.
Yes.
And Dr. Wins and other doctors that were involved in the children's raising.
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned that you also spoke with Amanda Smith-Hayes.
Yes.
And turn your attention to page 45 of your report. Did you note that Amanda told you that she returned to New York from St. John's after she and Grant met because of a man she dated there who was very jealous?
That's what that sentence says, yes.
Okay. And could you read the next 2 or 3 sentences?
Quote, so this is a direct quote from her. For Grant's protection, we didn't want to announce to the world that we were dating, end of quotes. She and Shay returned to New York, she says, and the two of them encouraged Grant to move there.
And did she go on to tell you, could you read the next quote?
The next quote is, he said he didn't want to return to North Carolina. His only connection there was his kids. He was depressed there in New York City because he missed the boys so much, especially Grant the fourth. Not so much gentle because he didn't have a bond with him, period, end of quotes.
And do you go on to state that Amanda said that when Grant came to North Carolina, she came with him?
Yes.
Did you find that Amanda had any other connection with the state of North Carolina other than these 2 little boys?
I don't think so.
Additionally, could you read the last line of that paragraph? And not
okay.
to skip anything, but do you talk in this paragraph about Amanda's concerns for the boys and the moving to New York and that whole situation, which you mentioned previously?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last sentence of the paragraph, could you read that for this jury?
Amanda says they, meaning she and Grant is what I'm referring to, realized Laura was untrustworthy when she, quote, told a bunch of lies about gentle surgery, end of quotes, and when she filed for custody with a court date for a time period when Grant was to go to China, quote, on gigs, end of quotes.
And so after you went through this entire evaluation process, the testing, the sitting down with the parents, spending 20 to 25 hours with each of them and talking to all of these collateral sources, did you come up with an analysis and some conclusions about what you had seen?
Yes.
Okay. Ultimately, what did you end up recommending for these children?
Okay, that starts on page 57. So first I addressed the that I recommended shared legal and physical custody.
Okay. And specifically, how did you recommend the schedule of parenting to be accomplished?
What we call a 2-2-3 schedule, because little kids don't have memory. Their memory's not as developed as older children. It's hard for them to keep a mental image of a parent in their head. So the 2-2-3 schedule addresses the child's need to have the parents available to them. So there would be 2 days with parent A, 2 days with parent B, and 3 days with parent A. And then the second week it would flip-flop to the first 2 days of the week would be with parent B, And the second 2 days, parent A and then parent B for the weekend.
In order to accomplish that parental schedule, that would require the parents meeting on basically a Tuesday evening, a Thursday evening, and a Sunday evening every week. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Drawing your attention back to page 51 of your report, did you deem that the current schedule of parenting access time, where Amanda and Grant had the children for 5 days and Laura had them for the weekend, did you write that it was wholly inappropriate for children, the ages of these children?
I did at the top of that page, first paragraph.
And as you write through this report, you mentioned that you found Laura to be insecure and unsure at times.
Yes.
In the middle of that page, you write that Laura is impacted by her extreme anxiety and underdevelopment, and that she has no family support.
Let's see, where are you?
In the bottom of the second paragraph.
Yes.
Okay.
I see, yes.
And that when she separated and terminated her relationship with Grant Hayes, she had no family members to turn to.
Correct.
Okay. Additionally, you go on to say that basically that she makes ineffective attempts at controlling situations.
Yes, that's in the second to the last paragraph.
And so by being put in at that time, the current parental schedule of 5 days with Grant and Amanda and 2 days with Laura, you believe that could cause some emotional damage to the children?
Yes.
And going back to page 57, I apologize for making you flip back and forth. Under the recommendations, you write at the end of that paragraph, you write that the transfer of the children to Grant with that the children weren't emotionally or psychologically prepared for that type of schedule.
Correct.
And you go on to say that schedule caused a disruption that causes a tremendous sense of loss for these children.
Correct.
And so when you recommend a schedule that's 2-2-3, you're recommending that the parents cooperate with each other, I guess, much more frequently in exchanging the children.
Yes.
Additionally, in this recommendation section, turning your attention to page 54, did you note that, looking at the middle of the third paragraph, did you note that it is concerning that although Amanda is superficially kind and attentive to the children, she does not recognize Laura's importance and centrality to the children?
I see that.
And what do you mean by that? And let me rephrase the question to, I guess, piece it together. But had Amanda told you that, I'm looking at the top of page 54, had Amanda told you that she, Amanda, and Grant wanted to move to Nashville, Tennessee because Grant was a songwriter?
Yes, that's in that first full paragraph at the top.
And she went on to tell you that it was important for them as a family to travel with Grant.
Yes.
And you're recommending in this evaluation that 3 times a week those parents would have to meet to exchange the children.
Yes.
And then in the middle of page, or the bottom of page 54, you said that Amanda doesn't recognize Laura's importance and that centrality of the children. By that, are you referring to that travel schedule?
Yes.
In fact, both Amanda and Grant, looking at the top of page 54, mentioned to you that they wanted to travel out of the country to far-flung places like Hawaii, Europe, Sweden, India, or China.
Yes.
Grant told you he wanted to get a boat and sail to Greece.
Yes.
At some point, did you sit down with each parent, or Amanda, Grant, and Laura, and ask them what they wanted at the end of this evaluation?
Well, that was part of the procedures, yes, and it also was asked in the parenting history survey.
And Laura told you that she wanted Grant to have some role in her children's lives, correct?
Correct.
And she recognized the importance of their father being in their lives.
That is written in this report, yes.
This comment on page 54, did Amanda recognize that Laura needed to be in the children's lives?
I don't remember now exactly what she said. I know what I wrote here, and it's referring back to a number of different comments, because this section right here, I believe, is the analysis, isn't it?
So this is where you take everything you looked at
And
these recommendations.
right. This is where, in the analysis section of a report, you would pull together all of the data and then begin to see where the congruencies are and the things that are incongruent and try to explain that, and also address the referral questions.
And looking at the top of page 56, you mentioned that there are several reasons why the parents should share legal and physical custody.
Yes.
And you mentioned in there that based on the comments that all these collateral sources, Grant, his parents, and Amanda's wish, comments, and actions. And could you read the rest of that paragraph?
In fact, there are reasons why the parents should share legal and physical custody. These have to do mainly with Grant, Amanda, and the paternal, meaning Grant Hayes' parents, wish, comments, and actions that would effectively erase Laura as the children's mother and their collective insensitivity to the needs of the children for their mother.
So from this group of people, Grant's parents, Grant and Amanda, you learned that their wish, comments, and actions through the course of this evaluation suggested that they would effectively erase Laura as a children's mother.
Yes, that's what I have said here.
And you mentioned a collective insensitivity to the needs of the children for their mother.
Yes.
And you mentioned what Laura requested when she sat down with you about what kind of custody. Did Grant want Laura to have any role in the children's lives?
I would have to go back and look at his section for specifically what he said.
And on page 50, I believe it's on page 54, on the third paragraph at the first sentence.
In the, yes, I see it.
And could you read it? It starts in the first joint session with Laura.
In the first joint session with Laura, Grant stated that he and Amanda want full custody and believe Laura should have supervised visitation only.
And the end of this report, do you recommend some things for the parents and for the court in the evaluation of these children?
Yes.
And one of those things that you recommend is that Laura obtain a coach or a life coach.
Yes.
And what was that purpose?
Well, it says to help her as a sounding board before she makes ill-advised decisions. Also, she could benefit from working with a coach who could help her develop anxiety reduction skills, address her sense of inadequacy, and her pervasive sense of helplessness.
Okay, so is that basically saying she needs to get a mentor?
Yes. At the top it says it's recommended that she obtain a coach or, quote, a super parent. So a mentor would be another word for that.
And this time she was 27 years old.
Correct.
And at the top of that recommendations, that's where you recommend that the parents should share legal and physical custody.
That's the beginning. The recommendation section begins on page 57, and I was just reading from page 58, yes.
Thank you. Have one moment, Your Honor.
All right.
Dr. Calloway, we talked a little bit about the recommendations that you made. Did you also make recommendations for Amanda and Grant Hayes?
I know I made them for Grant. Let me see.
And I guess, was Amanda really under your purview at this point?
Not like the parents, because the parents were the two litigants.
Okay. And you had some concerns about Grant Hayes?
I did.
Okay. And in fact, fact, you suggested that he get a parent coach and teach him more about attachment theory and why Laura was important to his life.
Well, to teach him more about what it says here is his autocratic manner will not serve his children well for the long run, and he's in need of specific coaching on specific skills, meaning specific parenting skills.
Sure, and you also, as part of this, evaluated Grant as a parent.
I did.
And I guess during that, did you learn that Amanda was taking care of the children more than Grant was?
Yes, I believe that's referenced in this report.
So do you suggest that Grant treat some of the problems that he had so that he could be a better parent to these children?
Yes.
And you question whether he could have a mood disorder or other explanations for the logical way that he thinks?
Yes, that's on page 59.
Okay. And you're concerned about him having some sort of substance abuse issue?
Yes.
And how did you acquire those recommendations? Is that by interviewing Grant and seeing the circumstances around his life?
Yes.
And did you also recommend that anyone else who worked with that family receive a copy of that report?
Yes.
Report?
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, after you make this recommendation of the 2-2-3 parenting schedule, do you provide it to the court?
Typically in a sealed envelope to the court.
And then would you come to testify during the custody hearing that was to be conducted on August 15th of 2011? Usually
one party will have me come testify. Okay. I heard Mr. Sargent say he intended to do that.
Okay. And in fact, this evaluation, the answers to those questions, were far more positive for Laura than they were for Grant.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Given where she started, which was that if you go back and read the kind of allegations that are mentioned in the very beginning of this report that he made about her, I think probably yes, that would be a fair conclusion.
Sure, and those allegations that Grant Hayes made about Laura were pretty much unfounded in terms of whether she was crazy or not.
Yes.
And you just found her to be immature.
Yes.
And so, looking at sort of the totality of this evaluation, Laura, the evaluation would have benefited Laura in the custody dispute when it occurred on August 15th.
I don't know about that.
Okay. But previously she only had the kids for 2 days, and you're recommending that she get the kids for either 4 or 3 days during the week.
That is what I recommended. As Mr. Sargent pointed out, it's the judge's decision, not mine.
Sure, and you would come to testify?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Nothing further.
Do you have questions?
Yes, I do, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Callaway.
Hello.
Let me begin, if I may, by asking you some questions about your educational background. Where did you go to college?
I went to Queens College, which is now Queens University in Charlotte, North Carolina.
And what was your degree in?
Psychology.
And explain for me, if you will, in the general sense, what is encompassed in the term psychology.
Well, it's the study of human behavior, and it could also involve the study of human behavior and its pathological forms and how to intervene to alleviate people's suffering, and, as I said, about clinical psychology.
Did you obtain a Master of Science degree?
I did.
I think I also heard you say that you also had a master's degree.
That's the MS degree.
The MS, Masters of Science degree. Where did you obtain that?
From NC State.
And was that also in psychology?
Yes.
And then you, if I heard you correctly, indicated that you had obtained a PhD in psychology.
Yes.
Was the PhD, where did you obtain that?
NC State.
Was that specifically in forensic psychology, or did that require you to have received further training?
You're asking me two questions. The first part of your question, the degree from NC State was a PhD in psychology. The second part of your question with regard to forensic psychology requires additional training.
Where did you obtain the additional training in forensic psychology?
If you look at my curriculum vitae, I've attended a number of different workshops, courses, supervision, consultation. There was no formal program that I attended where, like I did when I got my PhD from NC State. There wasn't a program that I attended to obtain that degree.
And
Or that specialization, I guess would be a more appropriate word.
And if during the course of your studies, you were required, were you not, to become thoroughly familiar with the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders?
No, I don't think that's true.
Did you study it?
I have referred to it at times, but no, it was never a deliberate or certified course of studies that you take even continuing education about, say in the course of a workshop.
But it is a book that provides you with information that you need in the performing evaluations of the kind that you have done.
No, it's not necessary.
Are you familiar with anything in the DSM?
Certain categories, yes.
Are you familiar with the category antisocial behavior?
Are you talking antisocial behavior, or do you mean antisocial personality disorder?
You used the right term. I used the wrong term. Antisocial personality disorder.
You're speaking of the DSM-4 now?
The DSM-4, yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Are you familiar with that information?
I couldn't quote you what it says, no.
But you would recognize it if you saw it, wouldn't you?
I would have to go read it. I wouldn't rely on my memory to...
May I approach the
yeah.
witness, Your Honor?
Sure.
Let me ask you, if you will, Dr. Callaway, to examine what I have marked as Defendant's Exhibit number 24C and ask you first if you recognize that document.
Yes.
It's what we call the DSM, correct?
That book is called the DSM-4 TR, yes.
And it's called DSM-4 because of the particular edition.
Yes, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
Let me refer you over to section 301.7 entitled Antisocial Personality Disorder, and ask you, just take your time, and if you will, just go ahead and read from that page to the bottom of the 1, 2, 3, third page. And ask you if that assists you.
I'm sorry.
Objects to the relevance of this.
Well, finish your request, and then I'll deal with it.
Will it help you to recall the characteristics of an individual with antisocial personality disorder to review the DSM?
It will help me to review what the DSM says about antisocial personality disorder, yes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Could you do that?
Mm-hmm. You want me to read it to myself?
Just read it to yourself.
Okay.
you read that little part on the
Okay.
first page. Does that help you to refresh your memory on the characteristics of an individual who suffers from antisocial personality disorder?
It helps me to understand what the DSM says about it, yes.
You okay? May I approach witness, Your Honor?
You may. Let me ask you, doctor, in your profession, do you routinely use or refer to DSM-4?
Yes and no. In custody work, we never make diagnoses. In some of the work that I do in other areas, yes, if it's appropriate. Psychologists typically describe behavior, and we also have access to another classification system called the Psychodiagnostic Manual. And so I typically use both this means of nomenclature as well as the PDM, for arriving at some sort of a description of a person that will help the trier of fact.
Do you diagnose psychiatric disorders?
Rarely.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
May I approach witness, Your
You
Honor?
may.
Dr. Callaway, let me ask you, if you will, to examine what I have marked as Defendant's Exhibit number 24B and ask you if that is a copy of the same child custody evaluation report that you identified previously.
It looks like it is, yes.
If you will thumb through that, you will see that there's some areas that are circled, and that is for ease of reference.
Yes, and highlighted, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Also, if you will, examine what I've marked as Defendant's Exhibit number 24, and let me ask you what that document is.
This is a parenting history survey completed by Laura Ackerson.
And did you use that parenting history survey to assist you in preparing the child custody evaluation report?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. If you will keep this one.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. You keep both of them.
All right.
If I may first direct your attention to page 32 of the child custody evaluation report.
And you want me to look at the one you gave me, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Look
Okay.
at the one that the one that is marked for your benefit, 24B.
Okay.
And you see page 32 is that part of the report entitled Evaluation of the Father, Grant Hayes III.
That's where it's that part of the evaluation that refers to him starts, yes.
And if you will, flip over to page 33.
Mhm.
And you see that in order that you and I don't stumble around here all afternoon, there is an area circled.
Yes,
Would you read the first part of that page that is circled?
yes. Grant Hayes is an attractive 32-year-old African-American man of short stature with bald, shaved head, long fingernails, and relaxed manner. He is very extroverted, charming, gregarious, witty, and likable. He is jovial and verbose, was pleasant in manner, and rambled extensively during interviews, frequently in a tangential or off-topic way.
And then you will see in the next paragraph there is some additional information that has been circled. Would you read that?
During interviews, Grant rambled in his responses, requiring a refocus and a request to limit his verbosity. He was entertaining with his various stories and accounts of his experiences and seemed to enjoy recounting those various reports. Without limits, he seemed he could have rambled extensively for quite some time.
And if you will go to page 34, the first paragraph that is circled.
Grant was extremely negative, at times paranoid, with regard to Laura, her character, and her alleged actions. It was confusing why he repeatedly sought to tell others, in addition to me, about Laura's alleged sexually transmitted diseases and her internet activity with other men, which he characterizes as prostitution.
Then at the bottom of that paragraph, there is another paragraph circled.
Dr. Wins was uncomfortable with the anger and rage he expressed verbally with one or more children present in her office. His anger toward Laura and these various actions, where he is not wholly appropriate with regard to characterizations of her, make him appear to have a determined agenda.
And if you will, go to page 35, at the bottom of the page.
Grant has worked as a life insurance collector, as a pizza delivery man, for Kmart in the electronics department, and for National Finance as a collector and day trader. The longest he held any of these jobs was a year. He says he is self-employed since 1998 as the CEO of Hayes Limited and Rare Breed. In later interviews, he remarked that he employs his wife Amanda and Shay, her daughter. He repeatedly said during various interviews that he is supporting 5 people. He also reported in later interviews that his company makes artistic covers for iPhones. He works currently as a musician performing with bands.
And if you will go to page 36.
Start there, even though it's not a whole sentence at the top.
I'm sorry, go back to page 35 and read the first part of the sentence.
Okay.
It's broken up.
All right. When asked directly about how he earns money, he said he has 2 companies that market artistic covers for telephones and also sells artistic T-shirts. He also reported recently working in Hawaii to earn $10,000. We've got legal fees. Our lease is up in May and we want to buy a house. That was in quotes, I should have said, from starting with $10,000.
And then the next paragraph.
With regard to mental health treatments, Grant reports he went to Doctors Park in Greenville, North Carolina, hoping to, quote, hoping to find out if I was crazy, end of quotes. Later he explained that 5 years after being into the relationship with Emily Lubers, he, quote, wanted out. I felt like if I got a divorce, I would go to hell, end of quotes. He says he decided after reading a book that he was a borderline personality disorder and thought he needed to be taking the psychotropic medication Paxil. He reports the professionals in Greenville did not think he was crazy or borderline. He says he was prescribed Lexapro, Effexor, Depakote, Zoloft, and, quote, some others.
Then the next paragraph.
Grant reports he had trouble sleeping in 2006 when he, quote, took the divorce hard, end of quotes, and went to an urgent care facility for Linestra, a sleep medication. This facility wrote that they have a date of service for him in August 2006, although they cannot locate their records in their storage facility. During this time, he reports he started drinking and doing cocaine alone when he grew depressed and had no support from his family. He reports he tried XTC during this time, which made him paranoid. He talked with a bartender who told him to use cocaine to make the paranoia go away. Grant detailed an extensive history of polysubstance abuse where he habitually used many different illicit drugs, including unusual hallucinogens and heroin, where he engaged in intensive use of alcohol and illicit drugs, and where he routinely mixed alcohol and cocaine. From his report, he is clearly dependent upon and likely addicted to polysubstances. It is unlikely that he has discontinued his polysubstance abuse/use completely. He has also abused prescription drugs. He has felt and likely continues to feel that he performs in a more satisfactory way as a musician when he is using.
The next paragraph.
Grant reports he was suicidal and told his parents he wanted to kill himself when he was 16 years old. He says he was, quote, trying to get some attention, but it didn't work out, end of quotes. He reports his parents called the police and that he was taken to a hospital. His parents considered an involuntary admission for him and were counseled not to do this. He says the examining physician sent him home, a professional with whom he met once. He moved out of his home after this and attended East Carolina University briefly. He also acknowledges feeling suicidal after the demise of his first marriage in 2005 to 2006. When asked about other times he might have been suicidal, Grant reports he was, at age 14, quote, when listened to a bunch of Nirvana, Kurt Cobain whacked himself, end of quotes.
Over on page 37, the first part that you see there.
That circled him.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. He says every day with Laura was negative, and he describes her as controlling, manipulative, and underhanded. He believes she intentionally had children to try and keep, quote, a hold, unquotes, over him. He accuses her of, quote, flip-flopping, end of quotes, on her stories. He alleges she threatened to abuse the children if he would not reestablish his relationship with her. He is particularly upset that she used his PayPal account to go to an online site to meet men, which he interprets as online prostitution.
And the next part that is circled.
Grant says that after his first divorce, he wanted to marry a Stepford wife. Amanda told him she was an actress, had played a Stepford wife, and he thought it was destiny. Amanda is pregnant and expecting in June. She is not working out of the home currently and does not plan to work outside the home once their baby is born. Amanda says about working after the baby comes, quote, no, I'm also an artist. I see myself with 3 little kids doing art at their little table, end quotes. Grant comments that Amanda, quote, is a great mom. She has a 21-year-old daughter. She's done this before and she knows what to do, end of quotes.
And then at the bottom of the page, it has the caption, test results, impressions, and conclusions.
Yes.
Would you read the part that is circled there that continues over to the next page?
Yes. Grant views the world as a, quote, dog-eat-dog, end of quotes, place where one has to constantly be on guard not to be taken advantage of. He expects interpersonal relations to be highly competitive and adversarial and not collaborative or acquiescent. He views the world as a threatening place and is suspicious of others. This sense of victimization characterized much of his interviews, which are replete with examples of this sense of being maltreated and singled out. Some of this sense of victimization may well stem from being an African American man under scrutiny in a custody matter within a legal setting. Regardless of the origin or various explanations, Grant has limited flexibility with regard to this and other features of his personality.
The next paragraph.
His perception that the world is a, quote, dog-eat-dog, end of quotes, quote, dog-eat-dog place, end of quotes, makes for difficulties in interpersonal relations. He expects competitiveness and aggression in human relations and only minimally expects collaboration and cooperation. His expectations for competitiveness and aggression are sufficiently intact and elevated that he is likely to behave in assertive and or domineering ways more often than not. When others disagree with him, he will perceive this as a challenge to the self. His sense of self is fragile, and he is more self-focused than other adults. He does not understand others well, and his base of understanding of others stems from fantasy-derived notions rather than realistic ones.
And then the portion of the next paragraph that is circled.
He may engage in antisocial behaviors which he acknowledges. During interviews, for example, he reported a significant cocaine habit and has obtained a DUI, that's driving under the influence, on one occasion. On the MMPI, this is a test that I gave him, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, he endorsed a statement as true that he has had difficulties with the law, and another as true that he sometimes stole things when he was young.
The next paragraph.
Of great concern is a finding that he scored positive for the suicide constellation, which is abbreviated as S-con, on the Rorschach, and reports a history of suicidal thinking. Scoring positive for the suicide constellation does not mean he will kill himself, which is to say that this index is not a predictor for suicide. A positive finding for this index does mean that Grant's personality organization, his pattern of personal strengths and limitations, and the difficulty of his thinking are all similar to the same patterns and organizations as individuals who have successfully committed suicide. At a minimum, a positive finding for the suicide constellation suggests Grant has significant pathological emotional disarray. Grant reports suicidal thinking as early as 14 years of age, reports 3 significant periods of suicidal thinking, and reports extensive illicit drug use following the last episode of suicidal thinking. On testing and during interview, he looks like an individual with an underlying mood or thought disorder, one who is self-medicating with the use of chemicals or illicit drugs.
The next paragraph.
Despite being extroverted and gregarious, Grant looks very uncomfortable with emotions and uses a form of defense to neutralize emotions. This defense is intellectualization, where the individual seeks to neutralize emotion by making emotions intellectual instead. In the extreme, when individuals use intellectualization to the degree Grant is using it, the over-reliance on intellect to neutralize emotion can lead to delusional thinking. Reliance on this defense mechanism could also cause him to look more greatly impaired than he is. Grant exhibited difficulties in clear thinking during testing and on interviews, difficulties that are consistent with individuals who have had episodes of suicidal thinking or intent, individuals who have used illicit drugs, and or individuals who experience problems in thinking as a function of an underlying mood or thought disorder. He has great difficulty, for example, in maintaining clear focus and rationale to his explanations, has difficulty maintaining a detached, rational perspective, rambles off topic, and was consistently tangential. Findings from testing, supported by findings from some interviews, indicate he seizes upon information before he has collected all relevant pieces of a problem situation. This leads him into incorrect conclusions and faulty judgments. His interpretation of events, others' motives and actions, and the world about him is damaged and inaccurate relative to other adults.
Going on over to page 46, I believe, is the next section, and that is the area where you talk to collateral sources.
That's correct, yes.
And if you will look back at page 45, if you will see that this is part of an interview with Heidi Schumacher, a friend of Laura's for 8 years.
Yes.
And on page 46, would you read the paragraph that is circled.
Heidi is also unequivocal in her dislike for Grant, whom she believes was and is emotionally abusive to Laura, controlling and manipulative. She says she never saw Grant hit Laura, although she is sure he has because of one occasion when she showed up at Laura's home. Heidi says Grant and Laura had been arguing, and Grant left the home. When Heidi arrived unannounced, Laura had a black eye and a bloody nose, Heidi says. In response to my questions, she said no, Laura did not seek medical treatment because she did not want to get Grant in trouble. Heidi sent me an email Grant sent to her, to Laura's pastor, to Laura's boss at work, and to 2 other friends of hers to inform them about Laura's online activity with men she did not know. She also informed me that she has been documenting Grant's various behaviors that are intimidating, inconsistent, and illustrative to her of his disreputable character. She says she documented in the way she did because, quote, he's not a good person.
Next paragraph.
Heidi reports that Grant isolated Laura. She says he hung up on her when she called Laura or could be heard in the background when she called Laura, telling Laura to hang up the phone. She reports, quote, that Grant told Laura he was the only thing going in her life, that no one would ever love her except him, end of quotes. Heidi says, quote, Laura was very dependent on Grant and didn't do anything for herself. He either provided or she went without, end of quotes. She has met Amanda as well and told Laura that Amanda was a lot like her, parentheses, Laura. She explained that Amanda dyed her hair like Laura did when Grant wanted her to, and wears the same kind of clothes Laura did when she was with Grant. She reported, too, that Grant had, quote, crazy, end of quotes, ideas, like when he told Laura she had to keep the children safe because the world was going to end. She reports she helped Laura leave Grant and had to reinforce with Laura that she, quotations, Laura, was not crazy. Heidi says, quote, look at her, meaning Laura, now. She's finally back to herself. She's strong. She's doing great without him, end of quotes.
And if you will go on over to page 51, and that is under the category of analysis. Would you read the final paragraph?
Yes, I was just,
I'm sorry.
yeah, okay. Grant, on the other hand, has a charming way of engaging and interacting with others, which was noted by Dr. Bukowski as well as by me, Amanda, Amanda's daughter, and others. Also noted by Dr. Bukowski was Grant's need to promote himself by reference to the famous musicians with whom he has reportedly played.
And if you will go on over to page 53, the first paragraph is circled.
53, I don't see a paragraph circled on 53.
You have 53?
I'm looking at page 53, I don't see a paragraph.
See the circles? Okay. Would you read the first full paragraph?
Both parents are risk takers.
Yes, ma'am.
Both parents are risk takers and both have been willing to violate conventional rules of society. Therefore, their value to the children as role models of good citizens is very much in doubt and is questionable. For this reason, and because of their various serious personal issues with drugs, alcohol, and sex, because of their individual personality and mental health pathology, and because of the children's very young ages, it is imperative for the children's welfare that the court retain oversight of these parents for some time period. In addition, it is imperative that the court require that certain standards of behavior be met by these parents, most especially not to engage in illicit drug use. It is also imperative that the children be exposed to more conventional role models of adult behavior, and this will also be addressed in the recommendations.
In the next paragraph?
Same page, you mean right below it?
Yes, ma'am.
Starting with regard to the conflict?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. With regard to the conflict between them, the following is a summary of findings. Grant has an inflated sense of personal worth, and Laura challenges that. Therefore, he goes on the defensive and attacks. She fights back with a vengeance and at the same time looks preoccupied, anxious, and tense. Their conflict is fueled by his substantial, routine misinterpretations of her motives and actions, by his general limited understanding of others, by his need to be valued and held in high regard, by her ineptness in dealing with interpersonal relations, by her perpetual state of being overwhelmed, and by her emotional reactivity when she thinks she is being challenged, dismissed, or disregarded. He reacts and acts aggressively toward her, and she becomes anxious and overwhelmed, striking back in passive, ineffective ways that are more detrimental to her than to others. Some of these patterns and ways of interacting, established through testing, interviews, and reports from collateral sources, were observed too by me during the first joint appointment.
And if you will go to the next page, page 54. Do you have a paragraph that's circled there?
Yes.
If you will read that one.
It is concerning that Grant uses this system to promote a negative view of Laura and to bring potentially serious charges against her. He made a report to the police regarding bruises on the children's legs, a report that could have resulted in a misdemeanor child abuse charge if substantiated.
And if you will go on over to the final page, the first paragraph.
Page 59,
Yes, ma'am.
the top recommendation.
The very first paragraph.
It is recommended that Grant be referred to a psychiatrist for evaluation regarding the question of a mood disorder or other possible explanations for the illogical, disturbed thinking he exhibits. A psychiatrist with expertise in treatment of addictions is recommended, and evaluation for medication is also recommended. It appears that Grant has used multiple illegal drugs to self-medicate an underlying mood or thought disorder. An evaluation by a psychiatrist knowledgeable about addiction, and an evaluation, I guess I meant, is recommended by a psychiatrist knowledgeable about addiction and polysubstance abuse. It is recommended that this psychiatrist submit a report to the court under seal for the court's review in camera.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, if you will refer to the parenting history survey that Laura completed. Question 105, I'll read the question if you'll read the answer.
Which page is that? Or maybe it doesn't have a page number.
Well, if you look at the top, it has the number 2963 on it.
963, okay.
It's, I think, the next to the last page of that document.
All right, I'm there.
You have it, number 105. The question is, are there any additional significant issues that might be raised regarding the care, welfare, parenting, visitation for residents of the children that you have not already mentioned? The answer is yes. Would you read her answer?
I am of the belief that Grant 3 has a personality disorder. After living with him for almost 4 years, I have found a few labels that fit him, but one that is near perfect, sociopath. The others are narcissist, borderline personality, and psychopath. He likens himself to the main characters of these movies: 6 Degrees of Separation with Will Smith, The Talented Mr. Ripley. Grant III has told me that he is the character depicted in these movies.
Have you seen the movie The Talented Mr. Rip?
No.
If I may approach witness Sean.
All right. Was there an objection?
Yeah, there was, but
Overall.
You can put that aside.
Okay.
Let's go back to the DMV.
I think we're still searching for someone who's seen the talented Mr. Ripley. Go to your next question.
Dr. Callaway, what I would like to do is to read you statements from the DSM and ask you if you disagree or disagree with these statements.
Are you going to read the DSM?
I'm going to read from 2 pages of the DSM.
And ask her if she agrees with the DSM?
If she agrees with these characteristics.
Sustain.
Do you agree, Dr. Callaway, that an individual with antisocial personality disorder is someone who is very charismatic?
Objection.
Overall, she can answer. If you're comfortable rendering an opinion or answer to the question that's formed.
I don't know how to answer that.
Okay.
Would you agree that someone with anti-personal personality disorder is very charming?
It's very difficult for me to answer your question for a couple of reasons. The new DSM-5 organizes personality disorders in a very different way than DSM-4. And that would be the most recent information that a person making a diagnosis of someone would rely on is the DSM-5. So that's one reason I'm struggling. The other reason is that my understanding of antisocial personality disorder is that it's the only personality disorder that is based on pretty much on illegal behavior. All the other personality disorders are based on a description of personality organization. So you could use a number of ways of characterizing an antisocial personality disorder, and it would fit with the DSM-4.
DSM-4. The DSM-4 is what we're concerned with here. That's the one that was in effect in 2011.
Objection to relevance.
Well, the question is, when was the DSM-4 replaced with the DSM-5?
I'm sorry, I didn't
When
hear
was the DSM-4 replaced by the DSM-5?
Just in the past year.
Okay. Sustain.
In your evaluation of Grant, did you find similarities to the information contained in the DSM-4?
I don't think I can answer that. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. May I have a moment, John?
Sure.
Briefly, just to be clear, Dr. Callaway, your report's 59 pages long,
Yes.
and a good portion of that is this analysis of Grant, Hayes, and Laura Ackerson, correct?
That's correct.
And you mentioned all these tests and procedures that you do with Grant and Laura Ackerson.
Yes.
Did you ever give any of those, the Rorschach, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, the Parenting History Survey, did you ever perform any of those tests on Amanda Hayes?
No.
Turning your attention to page 42, the third paragraph, and very quickly, you made some findings in this report that You made a lot of findings that Grant Hayes, I believe you just testified in the words of Heidi, he's not a good person. Is that correct?
That's what she said, yes.
At some point during this study, you recommended joint custody using this pattern. Did you have concern about anyone's safety in this study?
I was concerned about the children, and I recommended a GAL, for guardian ad litem, for them.
You noticed all these things that have just been read about Grant Hayes and all his problems and disorders and the way he thinks. Is it fair to say that you wrote a lot in this report of your concerns about Grant Hayes?
As well as I wrote about my concerns about both parents, yes. Strengths and limitations of both of them that might affect parenting.
And at some points you recorded in this report impressions and concerns you had about Grant and Amanda Hayes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Specifically on page 42, under test results, impressions, and conclusions, you wrote that Grant and Amanda are convinced that Laura is, and could you read the rest of that sentence? Read that sentence.
Oh, here, I see. Grant and Amanda are convinced that Laura is, quote, sick, poisons the children's minds, end of quotes, and has some form of mental illness.
And that came from both Grant and Amanda.
Yes, that's what this says.
And turning your attention to page 54, the second paragraph, these folks, Grant and Amanda, had told you that they wanted to travel the world. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's in that first full paragraph.
And you noted in that paragraph, and this comes straight from the report, that with these kind of expressed wishes by Grant and Amanda to move away, it is obvious they do not want Laura included in the children's lives.
Yes, that's the sentence right about toward the end of that
And that
paragraph.
refers to not just Grant, but also Amanda.
Yes.
And on page 56, where you talk about erasing Laura, that refers to Grant, Amanda, and the paternal grandparents.
Yes, that's what this says.
Nothing further.
All right.
And you concluded your report by recommending that Grant be referred to a psychiatrist for evaluation regarding the question of a mood disorder or other explanations for the illogical, disturbed thinking he exhibits.
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Folks, who's the next witness? Okay, I'm going to try to get her on at least to begin her testimony. I know she's been here all afternoon. We probably won't finish it today, but we'll start it. Let's take about 10 minutes, a little 10-minute break. We'll try to get back promptly in 10 minutes. We'll put Dr. Ross on and let you hear beginning what she has to say, and then we'll stop for the day. All right, we'll be in recess for 10 minutes. Thank you.